This is ABC 13 Community Close-Up. Visions.
Good morning and welcome to Visions. I'm Maya Shea. Donald Trump's election as America's next president was stunning to many people. Not only was it an upset victory over Hillary Clinton, according to many experts, it also sparked unprecedented protests against the president-elect, who raised fears during the campaign with what some have called anti-immigrant or anti-Muslim rhetoric.
A total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
But are those concerns real or realistic, or will there be new laws implemented? Joining us to talk about all these issues are Mustafa Carroll, Executive Director of the Houston chapter of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, or CAIR, and Natalie Hayashida Ong, who was an infant when she and her parents were detained at a Japanese internment camp during World War II. You can see that picture right there. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate it. And Mustafa, I want to start with you because you've been active in this whole in CAIR, in American-Islamic relations, for a long time. With the election of President-elect Trump, sort of what was the initial reaction among the Muslim community?
Well, among a lot of the Muslims, fearful, especially those who are recent immigrants. And when I say recent, I mean even as recent as 20 years, that I heard a lot of people fearful of being, sent back, etc. And many of us, we're just a little bit disappointed because the president-elect ran on a fear campaign. He ran talking about people. He ran about talking about ethnic minorities. He talked about Muslims. He was misogynistic in his references to women. And so we were kind of disappointed, but I've lived in this country all my life, and we'll get over this just like we get over many other things, but it was really disappointing.
And Natalie, I know you don't want to get into too much of the politics of how this all happened, but surely some of the rhetoric you've heard from President-elect Trump, did it concern you, given your background with your parents being interned in World War II?
Absolutely, because we were targeted, maybe by your religion, but because we looked like the enemy. You have to remember, this was a period of war hysteria, and I could see why, because we looked like the enemy, we were targeted and rounded up, taken away from our home, our businesses, our families, and taken away from the West Coast and into camps further inland. The injustice of it all, since I was only 13 months old, if you looked at that picture, it's hard to imagine that I'd have any memories, and I don't. But we've had a lot of discussions with people who have actually experienced it and talked with my parents before they died. And the scars, I think, opened up again when we heard this about making Muslims register and perhaps even forcing them into internment camps like the Japanese were done. That was scary. And I hope that that was just rhetoric and not a real possibility.
And so many things get said at campaigns on both sides. Whether it's presidential or governors or whenever there's election season. Mustafa, how concerned are you that this is actually something that might be implemented, or are you hopeful that this is just sort of a way to get elected, and then once the president-elect is sworn in office, the actual governing will be very different?
Well, I think the governing is going to be different because in this country the president is not king. But I think the rhetoric is critical. I think that it sets the tone. The president sets the tone for the country. And just based on who the president is now bringing into his cabinet, or president-elect is bringing into his cabinet, it is cause for concern. I don't think that he'll be able to do half of what he says he wanted to do at the campaign, but the rhetoric itself is troubling.
What do you think, Natalie? Do you think some of this rhetoric will actually come into fruition, or do you think, surely, you guys fought that battle back in World War II many decades ago?
And we're still fighting that battle, I believe, because there are still racial inequalities. There's still prejudice in workplace. And I think that there's enough people out there, good people, that realize that that's not the right thing to do now. We're not just Americans are all colors. It didn't matter whether my parents were born here or I was born here or my grandparents, my grandchildren who are fifth generation now. I suppose people still think of us as foreign because of the way we look. But
do people still ask your grandkids where they're from?
Oh, yes. I get that all the time. I also get, gee, your English is so good.
Well, I mean, we laugh about it, but I know there's nothing really that funny about that.
But right. I think I'll always look foreign, so I'll always be foreign to a lot of people until they get to know us.
And do you think Muslim Americans feel the same way in many respects?
I think many do. You know, and I try to be, I guess, kind of temperate about that, because if I try to imagine how it would feel if I went to another country and I was an immigrant and I got my citizenship in that country, naturalized citizen, etc., and then the president or the president-elect started making statements about my group. I think I would feel like they do. I have come from a different place. You know, I was born here, raised here, been here for generations, and so I don't have the same, I guess, fears per se as they might have. But if I was, I think it's completely rational.
Well, we will come right back to this conversation. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll take a quick break and continue this really fascinating discussion when our guest with